Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
I have a question. Who wants to go first? To win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Support also provided by the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, Detroit Journalism Engagement Fund, and the Bill and Shirley Fox Fund for Leadership and Public Affairs Programming at Detroit Public TV.
I think what's really amazing about this is the only Arab American National Museum in the country.
Is that right?
Yeah.
How about is it?
Yeah.
Well, and it belongs here. I mean, this is the sort of nexus of that.
But it's also
community
very
nationwide.
local here. I mean, it talks about the impact of the community on Metro Detroit.
Right.
And
I live in Troy, and there is a huge Arab American population in Troy and Sterling Heights, and that part of Oakland County as well.
I mean, a lot of people don't realize we're Arab American. Paul Hankum. Paul W. Smith, part Lebanese, half Lebanese.
Is he?
Yeah. David Adamany from Wayne State.
Yeah.
Doug Flutie.
I didn't know that.
Who knew? I think what's really great about just kind of sinking into a museum like this is the little detail.
Yeah,
I'm a
right.
big nerd for detail,
Yeah.
and to be able to just kind of take your time.
They've done such a good job here. Walk
Lots
around.
of stuff.
Welcome to One Detroit from the Arab American National Museum in Dearborn. We have a lot coming up for you, including Nolan's walking tour of small businesses along Vernor, plus a proposed change to something called the Public Charge Rule in the Department of Homeland Security. It has local immigration advocates concerned it will affect the access of health care for immigrants and U.S. citizens. We're going to explain that for you coming up. And finally, Southwest Detroit history through one man's salsa jazz band. We will introduce you to Ozzie Rivera. It's all coming up. But let's bring in our One Detroit contributors, Nolan Finley from the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson from WDET and the latest headlines, which means the weird comes out this time of year in the election season. From the Bill Schuette video from 30 years ago to Lieutenant Governor candidate Garland Gilchrist property issues to a swastika discovered in Senate candidate John James campaign video. But let's start with the Senate debates. Two back-to-back with Debbie Stabenow and John James. Nolan, I'm going to let you get first crack on what your perception was of both of those.
You know, I think that we should change the way we do debates. I've changed the way we do editorial board interviews for endorsements this year. My rule when they sit down, I tell the candidates, talk about you. As soon as you say my opponent, we're going to cut you off.
So you don't want any more attacking back and forth. You just want them to stay on their agenda.
I'm sick of it. That's all we're seeing in these commercials, these TV commercials. You learn nothing about the candidate, their positions when they're talking about the opponent. Because what we saw at the Senate debates, a whole lot, you got a little from the two candidates about what they're going to do. But mostly it was trying to characterize the other person, more so in the gubernatorial debate. That was all that was about. And I think, particularly for a candidate like John James in the Senate race, who needs to define himself.
He's got to identify himself for voters.
He's got an inspiring story. He's got a great story. Tell your story and tell us how that story is going to make you a good senator. He didn't do that.
But isn't that maybe part of our fault as the public in general, because we respond to negative ads and we respond to that kind of negative campaigning?
Well, that's true, but let's flash back to the spring when the three of us moderated the very first gubernatorial debate between all the candidates, Republican and Democrat. What was the rule? The rule was don't talk about anybody else. I didn't get any complaints from anybody who said I didn't see enough attacks. I think the public responds to what matters, and if you focus on substance, they get more out of it.
Okay, so what about this idea? What if you actually just took two topics for a debate and said, we're only going to concentrate, and it would change based on what candidates you're talking about. You're talking about Senate, you're talking about governor. Say, we're going to have a debate for the first 30 minutes is all about education. The second 30 minutes is all going to be about the economy or something like that. What if you did that?
I haven't seen any candidate in these major races with the depth to carry that off. that amount of time. Because what we've seen so far are very shallow proposals, very shallow ideas from these candidates. It's been all about either their personality or their attacks on their opponent. I haven't seen that kind of depth.
So if you think of what we see at the national level during presidential debates, presidential campaigns, we tend to see that, right? They will do multiple formats because you usually have three, and sometimes they'll say this debate is about foreign policy.
Yeah.
That debate is going to be about domestic policy. The reason you have that is because you have a commission who controls
because let's be honest,
the
you
debate.
cannot really answer a question about education in Michigan, or even two questions about education in Michigan with a 1 minute
That's right.
No,
time
right.
limit on it.
But you have a commission at the national level that sets the debate schedule, sets the format.
So when are you going to start that
with the
commission, Stephen?
We've been working for 6 years in Michigan to try to get there. We've been close before. We'll take another crack after this cycle.
And surely this season will be a motivator to do so, because these debates have been absolutely useless in terms of helping voters distinguish the candidates.
All right, let's talk really quick about the weird things that have popped up, the October surprises of all the various candidates. Does it really mean much?
I don't know. I mean, both of the statewide races seem not to be moving. The polling doesn't suggest that anything so far has moved them. I think the hope in each camp was that the negative story about the opponent would start to move the needle a little bit. I don't think any of them landed the punch quite the way they thought it would.
It's all been chicken manure, if you will. I mean, a guy
Say that.
a guy carelessly grabs a screenshot for an ad. It's got a swastika somewhere. It doesn't make John James a Nazi. Gilchrist has trouble with his property that he took a bet on, a speculation on, didn't get it done. Doesn't make him a slumlord, nor does it make him, unfit for the office he's seeking. Bill Schuette's got a 30-year-old ad where he looks a little creepy.
A little.
You know, he was a kid. That was before his wife and 2 kids.
He was also a member of Congress.
It isn't who he is today. It's all garbage in terms of what it tells us about these candidates and how they'll govern.
Yeah.
And look at how much time we spent on
Let's
them.
get back to the substance. All right. Our big story on the show was an idea of yours, Nolan, that when we said we were going to be here in Dearborn, that you were really interested in the businesses along Vernor that you want to take a look at.
I've always been fascinated by that strip, Dick's Vernor strip, as it goes from Dearborn into Detroit. Almost every storefront is full, and they move from Arab businesses to Hispanic businesses, ethnic businesses surrounded by ethnic neighborhoods. It's what Detroit was as it grew up. You had Irish neighborhoods, Polish neighborhoods, African American neighborhoods, German, what have you, and the suburbs absorbed most of them, or freeways overrun others, and you lost that sort of sense of culture and ethnic pride. You go down this strip and stop in these businesses, it's still that way. It's multi-generational businesses, grandfather, father, sons and daughters, mothers, all working in there together, serving a community, an immigrant community, an ethnic community that's extraordinarily loyal to these businesses. And I'm looking around here as we're on Dix Avenue in East Dearborn. Rouge plant still here, trains still rolling. You can feel sort of the muscle of this place. But this avenue, Dix Avenue, as it turns into Vernor, has always fascinated me. And I see it as the longest contiguous strip of viable small businesses in Detroit and Dearborn. It's what Detroit used to look like.
Ethnic families like shopping at stores and markets that cater to their own needs and cultural tastes. So they don't like usually to go shop at Meijer, for example, or Walmart. Walaikum salam.
Hi, how are you? Nolan Finley.
Ronnie Berry.
Ronnie, this is a halal meat shop.
Yes.
Serves customers in this area, and I assume coming in from everywhere.
Everywhere.
And from the walls, it looks like you might be serving some wild game.
I hunt. I hunt. It's a hobby. It's like golfing or reading a book. It's something you like to do. Get a little getaway,
So how long have you had this shop?
This shop has been here since 1947.
Right. Has it been
My
in your
father
family
came
that
overseas
long?
from Lebanon. He was a butcher in Palestine, but he lived in Lebanon, and then they came here, migrated here, and brought his family, brothers, sisters, and My kids, my two boys, my nephew, my brothers work here.
So it's all family.
It's all family. We buy our own livestock, slaughter our own halal products.
So who are your customers?
Our customers are everybody. Greek, Italian, American, Pakistani, Jordanian, Lebanese, a lot of Muslims, Christians who eat lamb, people who eat lamb.
What changes have you seen?
Well, a lot of people have moved out of the area and went west, East Dearborn, West Dearborn, you know, but this area still is the safest area in Dearborn. But as changes, just the environment, you know, the people, more people now than ever before. You know, when we started this business, we were like only the first butcher shop around.
Wow.
You know, now you can go down this strip and there's maybe 8 or 10 stores. In Warren Avenue, there's 8 or 10 stores.
So how the demographics change? You know, are there more Yemeni Americans?
In this area, yeah.
Yeah.
We got a lot of Pakistani in this area, mostly Yemeni American because of the mosque. And if you go down where I used to play ball in Canterbury Park, they just built 5 homes at the old park. So they're building here.
Right.
They're building here to stay here.
I wonder how, you know, restrictions on immigration in this presidential administration is going to affect the influx of immigrants.
What happens to these businesses?
Well, I can tell you, so there's a large Yemeni American population in this area, and a lot of their families are, you know, the families are split apart. Family members are stuck in either Yemen or Djibouti trying to get into the United States through the embassy there. You know, I can see how this would affect the businesses.
I mean, if it continues, if that flow of immigrants dries up, who move out, and you lose that cultural flavor, that ethnic flavor.
Hey guys.
Hey,
Marhaba. How are you?
hey, how you doing? Nolan, nice to see you.
Thank you.
Good shop. So I want to ask a little bit about the loyalty of the people in the community to the local businesses. How important is that sort of connection between the residents and the business community, the local small business people?
That's very important. First of all, the community likes to support, you know, people from their own communities, right? And you know, you do see products that you don't see anywhere else, and that's why really people come here. It's just so unique. You get a feel of home. I mean, that just goes to show, you know, kind of that duality of that identity that Arab Americans have, being an American and an Arab, you know.
Abdul, most of your customers come from the neighborhood here?
Yes.
إنه من برا مش من البلد هون.
No, from my country, some a lot of them from Yemen.
From Yemen.
A lot of them.
Are you Yemeni?
Yeah, Yemen.
So when did you come here, Abdul? When did you come to America?
I come like 2003.
2003?
Yeah.
What?
But I used to work in factory before. Make like parts for cars
How did you get into the retail business?
because I like this is by my house. Sometimes you work in factory and they close it, they get laid off. You know what I'm saying?
It's more stable.
Yeah, but I work with my dad. This is for my dad.
Your dad owns this place.
Yeah.
في كثير من اليمنية إنه بجيبوتي مش قادرين يجوا.
Yeah, that's a problem. Like, they have a lot of families in Djibouti and Malaysia and Oman. This is a problem. Before they used to give him visa. Like I have a lot of customers. They have his family in Djibouti, and Oman and Malaysia. Some of them like 1 year and a half.
Waiting to come in.
Yeah. So before like 2016, 17, they bring they easy for us. But I have one customer. He said almost like 18 months. They stay in Djibouti. He spent a lot of money. Because he spent a lot of money if your family over there.
Right.
Like a lot of customers, all my customers, they working for, because they didn't give me visa.
Most of your customers working?
Yeah, they're all working in factories.
Are some of them green card holders? Or
No, they're citizen.
They're citizens.
Yeah, a lot of them. A lot of them citizens. But now, you know, like immigration, like it's too hard to bring your family here.
Now you can't bring as many of your family
Yeah,
members in.
yeah.
Who's going to be running the businesses? Well, let's say now you get older, and you can't bring in your family.
I know,
members yourself.
this is a problem. And you get worker. But I like to work with my family better because they care about you. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you have your family help you out, you trust them, you know?
Nice talking with you.
Thank you, huh?
شرفنا.
يلا حبيبي.
Thank you so much.
اشربوا شيء والله.
I thought it was a really great piece, Nolan,
you.
and it was just nice and a personal kind of walk and storytelling. What'd you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it shows you what's possible or what's necessary even in these other commercial corridors we have in Detroit. I say all the time that Southwest Detroit, stretching out into Dearborn, is the one place in the city that feels like a city. Yeah. You go down there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and people are walking up and down the street, going in and out of businesses, shopping, eating, all of those kinds of things. Those are the kind of things you see in places like Chicago or St. Louis or other places, and we've lost that in so much of Detroit. We've got to build first the neighborhood density that supports that kind of thing, but then we got to give people the opportunity to operate those businesses. African Americans in the city have not had the same kind of access to capital, to the other things that you need to start businesses, to grow them in order to create that kind of density, and we need to fix that.
I think what was important to take away from that too is I really love hearing from families talking about this is our business and we have family working for us, and this is what's really important, that we're doing this together.
And I think that's the key. I mean, most of these people got their start from their father, and their children or mother and their children are getting their start from their parents. And that's when you talked about the African American community. It's one of the things that is missing. You haven't had that seed, that first plant, right? And you see once it gets started, you know, these businesses, the guy in the meat shop since 1940s, his dad started that business, and his boys are working in there, his granddaughter was in there. And so you see sort of how multi-generational you sustain the opportunity across that.
All right, well, thanks guys, that's going to do it for you. Thanks so much. But you know, a recent proposal from the Department of Homeland Security to change its public charge rule has immigration advocates here in Michigan very concerned. The change would let DHS take into consideration the use of health care, housing, or nutrition programs by legal immigrants as a charge against them when applying for green cards or visas. Now, DHS says it wants to promote self-sufficiency and make sure that legal immigrants are not a, quote, burden on the American taxpayer. But opponents say this penalizes immigrants who are here in this country legally. To understand how and to get some more perspective, I spoke with Rima Miraway, the Advocacy and Community Engagement Manager at Access. So explain to us exactly what public charge is.
So public charge is essentially how the government decides when someone is applying for a visa to come to the United States, or when someone is already in the United States and applying for a green card, they go through essentially a public charge test. It's not really a test, but it's essentially immigration officers will look at a person's age, income, they'll look at their use of public benefits to decide whether that person is going to become a public charge. And essentially what that means is if they have used cash assistance, if they've received cash assistance, or they have used long-term living assistance, government subsidized living assistance, they are considered a public charge and they're not given a visa or a green card.
So why the change now that Department of Homeland Security is proposing?
I can tell you what the change is. Why the change is essentially this is an attack on family-based immigration. We've already seen an attack on undocumented immigrants. I think this is a way to curb family-based immigration. So it's family separation on a different level. It's people who are here, who are bringing their families to join them. Now their family members will have to go through this public charge test again.
And so tell us what benefits that now that they're going to be looked at and that will be held against them essentially if they are using.
They're adding if someone is using Medicaid, if someone is using housing vouchers, or prescription drug subsidies, those would all consider them a public charge. However, there's one component that they're adding that is probably the most devastating for immigrants, and that is that for a family of 4, they would need to make at least $31,000 in order to not be considered a public charge. The problem with that is we know a lot of immigrants come here, and while some, not many, but some may need to use the public benefits initially because they don't have a job, because they don't have, they're in the process of getting all of those things. We know that some of them may use that initially, but then after that come off of it and contribute a lot more. In fact, there was a study that showed that people who stayed on public benefits in the long term were people in rural areas, not immigrants who were living in cities, simply because rural areas don't have as many jobs.
We are talking about legal immigrants, people
Absolutely.
who have come to this country legally. What would that do now, should there be a change in this? What would that do to community programs? in terms of access and helping some of these people?
Access provides a lot of services to immigrant communities and non-immigrant communities, right? We have our health clinic, and that's the problem. We also provide services for non-immigrant communities. We provide health services, employment and training services, and the problem is if this happens, we already have people, the changes haven't even gone through, and we have people calling and saying, I want to come off of Medicaid, I want to stop using SNAP because this is going to affect my immigration status or my family member's immigration status. So it would for an organization like ours that is already running at full capacity for immigrant and non-immigrant communities, this would put us at a huge disadvantage, and it means that we would have to get more money to be able to do this work. And so this money that the government is proposing to stop putting on immigrants who are coming here would have to come from somewhere else, and it's probably going to be at the disadvantage of local cities, of businesses in the area, of hospitals. Hospitals are very concerned with this rule change because they are going to have to absorb a lot of these costs. So there, it would be detrimental to essentially the communities. This is who it's going to impact. It's not just impacting immigrants, it's impacting our communities as a whole.
Now, this is just a proposed change to the public charge rule. We're in the midst of a 60-day public comment period before any final decisions are made. And finally, we like to take the opportunity to introduce you to interesting people who are doing some really cool things. I love this next story. Southwest Detroit's Ozzie Rivera is well known in that part of town. A resident historian, educator, and activist since the 1970s, he's also a musician, a percussionist in a salsa jazz band. Well, he's recently gotten back together with his group, a big band called La Inspiración. They play music that's now part of our city's history right out of Southwest Detroit. And senior producer Bill Kubota has his story.
I grew up in a musical family where Puerto Rican traditional music was played a lot. My father played cuatro, which is a 10-string guitar, particular to Puerto Rico. And since he was the only one in the 60s that would play it in Detroit, I used to see all the musicians come to my house. When some musicians weren't performing that particular night, they would take their drums to Clark Park and start drumming. I used to live on Toledo, would walk down to Vernor, and as soon as I turned the corner on Junction and Vernor, I would hear the drums play. The people in the neighborhood, particularly Caribbean islanders, whether they were Dominican, Cuban, or Puerto Rican, primarily Puerto Rican, they would just, hey, let's have some fun. Because it was just kind of a impromptu, what they call rumba. Bembe, which is a jam session. The way we saw it back then is that our cultures were so denigrated, looked down upon, that to actually perform that kind of music or do that kind of theater or dancing was a reaffirmation of being proud of our cultures. So for many of us, we thought that alone was striking a political statement. When I was younger, community festivals were the norm in the city of Detroit. You have music festivals, they don't tend to be community festivals. I mean, every single weekend we could go to a different part of the city and we had our pick of community music festivals. And that's how people learned from each other. That's how I learned how to really play drums, drum circles, because that is the main way Latin Caribbean kids and others used to learn drums. The conditions were there were a lot of cross-cultural interaction. It was that ambience. Plus, at the same time, nationally, you had the civil rights movement, so these people were affected by that. The anti-war movement, the growing women's movement. So, people of my generation, a little bit older, were right in the middle of all of that. So it affected their music. For me, it's never been about money, never. And most of the musicians that play this music, even those that are commercially successful, they normally don't make a living off of this. Internationally, this music is really well respected. I don't think it'll go away. It hasn't gone away even after decades of change. My father and I had real strained relationship growing up, but the one thing that he gave me was this love culture. And for that, I'll forever be indebted to him. Because I can't consider myself Ozzie without that. It's part of who I am.
Thank you very much. We're La Inspiración.
And that is going to do it for One Detroit. Thanks so much to the Arab American National Museum for having us here. We are on social media. Find us and tell us what you'd like to see. I'm Christy McDonald. We'll see you next time.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Maryland cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
I have a question. Who wants to go first? To win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Support also provided by the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, Detroit Journalism Engagement Fund, and the Bill and Shirley Fox Fund for Leadership and Public Affairs Programming at Detroit Public TV.